Hey everyone, good evening. My name's Julie Seibert and I'm the host of Reawaken Your Brilliance. So honored that you've decided to spend your Wednesday evening with us. And Reawaken Your Brilliance is a show that brings together body, mind, spirit experts to help you live your best life possible. At the beginning of every show, I like to share a thought of the day. And my baby brother Justin shared this story with me. If you have been listening for a while, you know I've talked about my nieces Claire and Emma and my nephew Max. And so Justin told me the story that Claire, who's 6, and Max, who is 5, came up to him and said, "Daddy, we know what the bad words are." And they begin with an H and an S and an F. And my brother's telling this story and thinking, oh my gosh, they know the bad words. And I'm thinking that they're too young. And so Justin's like, oh, okay, so you guys know what the bad words are. And they said, yes, they're fart, stupid, and hate. Now, fart, I'm kind of okay with, and I think that that's okay for the kids to say that. But when I was thinking about it, how great would our world be if we didn't call each other stupid or use the word hate? Think about how many times a day, whether it's you're calling yourself stupid or you're using the word hate, even if you don't really mean it and it's become part of your vocabulary. I'm going to challenge you this week to look at something like stupid and hate and not use that, or whatever word it is that you use, whether it's to harm yourself or someone else. So look at your language this week and see where you can make some changes to bring some more positivity into your life. So I'm going to tell you about tonight's guest. Cinda Crawford is an average woman who lives an extraordinary life of abundant blessings. Previously riddled with tragedy, sickness, and 15 years of excruciating pain and suffering of fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, she now enjoys healing and health. After receiving divine inspiration, she developed Sacred Cellular Healing, a holistic healing method that is designed to help other people get well too. Cinda's life story and healing technique are revealed in her new book, From the Floor, Looking Up, which will be in publication very soon. We'll ask her about it at the end of today's show. Online now, Cinda hosts the Health Matters Show, the hottest blog and podcast on the internet today, dedicated to helping people with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome figure out how to get well. She also runs Get Well Health, a blog featuring information, hope, and help for all kinds of chronic illnesses, and Cinda's healings programs, products, and services. Welcome, Cinda.
I'm happy to be here. I truly am. It's such an honor to be here with you and your audience.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. I've gotten to know Cinda a little bit through Skype when asking her to be on the show, and she's a true Southern pistol, so I'm thrilled that she's joining us tonight.
Well, I'm here, and I'm just excited to be with you.
Well, let's dive right in because I know that this is a big topic. I know people who have suffered from chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia. It's a lot more common than we think. So how did you come into to develop Sacred Cellular Healing?
I started out being very, very ill myself with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, like 15 years of illness. And I was about as sick as anyone could be because I had 4 or 5 viruses on top of that. I was bedridden. I could no longer work my jobs, which were filled with stress. And there was nothing to do at first except be sick. But I think inside I always knew there was more. And when I got to the point where I was just a bit better, I began to investigate what was out there. And energy healing was certainly an answer for me. I found a lady who could help me and instruct me some. I enjoyed what she did for me and realized it was a real answer for me. So I kind of went on with it from there. It took about 2 years after I began to feel better and after I began working with her. But I became an ordained minister, and then I developed my own healing technique, which has allowed me to heal pretty close to 100% now. I'm about 95, I call it. I always feel there's room for improvement.
Excellent. What exactly is Sacred Cellular Healing?
Well, it's energy healing, that's for sure. And I'm sure you have heard of people who talk about what they do as being energy healing. And I can speak more on that in just a minute. But it is also a combination of the sacred part of us. Each of us are sacred individuals, and I believe that down to my core. If you combine the energy that God gave us and then you include your sacred nature, there's really no more powerful combination. I call it healing from the cells out, because we look at everything with sacred cellular healing, and that's, I think, why it's so effective. It's beyond as helpful as normal energy healing is. I think it is goes the extra mile because of including the sacred part of it. Some people are a little scared of that, or a little bit, I'm not sure, about all that. But as long as someone has some type of a belief in a higher power, we can go through this. No one has to have any one particular belief.
Excellent. And we actually already have a question for you, Cinda. And I want to remind our listeners, I'm monitoring the Skype chat here on the computer. So if you have questions, I'll be sure to ask them. And if you'd also like to call in, if you're in the Triangle area, you can call 919-518-9773 or get on to us by Skype, Computers 2K Voice. Alexandria would like to know, what are the basic principles of your healing technique?
If you look at each of us, we are like a three-legged stool when we're balanced. We're part mind, part body, and part spirit. Think of that three-legged stool, and you're sitting somewhere on that stool, and one of the legs comes out. Well, guess what? You're going to fall over, forward, backwards, sideways, somewhere. Your life is going to be unsettled. And that's the way it feels when you're sick, either with an emotional problem or a physical problem or a spiritual problem. You just don't feel like you've got a good foundation. So if you can work with and shore up that leg that isn't working, then you can work on balancing the entire equation. And guess what? Your health naturally rises. In my opinion, God designed the human body to heal itself. And when it's balanced, when it doesn't have too much stress, when it doesn't have too many events that are intruding upon living a nice, healthy life, then you can get healthy again.
Oh, I absolutely believe that. And I know I suffered from depression. And when I look back on my life, I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and they just wanted to have me do more tests and try to figure out what was wrong. And there was something like I have a growth on my thyroid. It was benign. But looking back, I was just depressed. But it affected my health. I got the flu like clockwork every year for 2 weeks. I was out. Now that I'm happy and have kind of dealt with all my stuff, I very rarely get a cold. So I absolutely believe whatever's going inside your mind absolutely affects your body. So how is sacred cellular healing a body-mind tool?
Since I created it, of course I know the most about it. I am sharing it with people, and anyone who wants to learn it can actually learn it. I want it to be extremely effective and extremely a useful tool for very many people. If you're not afraid to look in the mirror, if you're not afraid to ask yourself the tough questions, if you've got some energy that you can spend on yourself, then something like sacred cellular healing is very appropriate for anyone who is not feeling well. And when I say not feeling well, that really can be all things. I talk about trauma a lot. If you get on the website and start looking into the information, I talk about trauma. But trauma can come from anything. Trauma can come to where your sophomore coach yelled at you and screamed and called you names and embarrassed you in front of everyone. Trauma can be getting fired from a job or just losing a job. Think how many people that's appropriate to right now. Trauma can, of course, be the obvious ones: the physical abuse, the emotional abuse, the sexual abuse. Those are the ultimate traumas, and certainly ones that haunt us and come back and can rule our lives until we can face them and look at them squarely, knowing that in looking at them squarely, you're taking their power away. And once you do that and you're more in control, they don't have the ability to, I'm going to use that word haunt you, but that I'm sure there's a better verb than that. They don't have the ability to manipulate you like they've always done. Think of it like a record player. Okay, remember the old phonographs, and we put the records on the side, the record player, and if they had a little bit of a scratch, it'd get to that scratch and back again, and it'd play over again, and then you get back to scratch and it'd go over. And that's what happens every time with emotional damage that's within any of us. Every time somebody looks at you that way, somebody says those wrong words, someone insinuates that you're too fat or too skinny, or you don't know what you're talking about and belittles you and puts you down, that just brings you right back to where you were either a little child or where you were, in that.
Cinda, we have a couple questions for you on the chat that I want to get to. Ace would like to know, do you teach this and where?
Well, I am teaching it through the Learn How to Heal Yourself membership course, which is online. You can go to getwellhealth.com and get that. Now, there's a free version, and the free version is fine, but you and I know as well as anyone, when you get something for free, you don't get everything. My suggestion is that people come and join at the platinum level. I mean, it's less than $30 a month, and for 12 months, where are you going to get something that you can use for the rest of your life for that amount of money? I teach via the internet. I teach via video and audio. And if people have problems, they can ask me to intervene. And I do that because I actually do healing work all the time for people. And I'm happy to do that through the Learn How to Heal Yourself membership course and give people one-on-one help. I call it healing consulting. Or
healing consulting. Okay.
Whatever you want to call it.
Well, we've got another really interesting question. I know that you talked about at the beginning of the show about how you bring God, higher power, whatever word people like to use. Alice in Wonderland, Alice in Wonder, I'm an atheist. Will this still work?
I've thought about that often. Generally, most atheists, and I could be wrong, Alice will have to tell me I'm wrong, they have some concept that they do hold precious, and some place where they find their meaning in their own life. I have no problem in dealing with anyone that is an atheist, but the thing of it is, an atheist may have problem dealing with me because I refer to God. I mean, that is my root, and that's how I work. I bring in and I actually, consult and talk with either Jesus or God. Rarely angels, sometimes some of the saints, if something is particularly difficult and we're trying to get through with it. Now, if they don't mind me doing that and they say, well, let her do her thing, as long as I get better, that's fine, then we're good to go.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions here. Bobby Blue Jean, do you think the clothes we wear can help us or hurt us?
The clothes we wear? I don't know that I understand the root of that question.
I'm not sure either. So, Bobby Blue Jean, if you want to expand on that. In the meantime, Ace would like to know, do you have to be a Christian to work with you?
No. I have dealt with people from all types of faiths, and you do not have to be a Christian. But as I mentioned, I am working from a Christian perspective. So as long as they have no problem with that, no, it works just fine. I'm not going to intercede on anyone's personal beliefs. That is your choice.
Okay.
And it's just that's where, well, let's put it this way. I have no power. I'm not a psychic. I am not anything other than a child of God. And as I come to you as an ordained minister, I'm coming to you under the authority of God. So that's all I can say. It's not to raise me above anyone. I do not mean that. All I mean is that's the voice I speak from.
Okay, so if someone's starting to work with you and doing sacred cellular healing, does that cause a real change in someone's life? Can you give us an example maybe of someone? I mean, you've talked about your own process of having been sick for 15 years and not being able to work, but talk a little more about that.
The process is very subtle, and yet it's extremely dynamic. Most people come to me so ill. I mean, they can hardly fill out the paperwork, and get all the illnesses and all the problems down, because I ask a lot of very poignant questions. The deeper we delve, the more we look at all your issues, the better chance we have of working with them effectively. It's like, think of cleaning out, spring cleaning. I mean, you want to get all the dust out. You want to get all the problems out. And holding something back is probably the one thing you ought to work on. So, no, we work very decidedly. We work very carefully. It's not a quick process. If it were quick, it probably wouldn't work so well. But I have worked on everything from just being sick with things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. I've worked on alcoholism. I've worked on people with extreme sexual abuse issues, kind of soup to nuts. One of the most special experiences I ever had was a girlfriend called me and asked me about her newborn grandchild. And she said, I'm afraid she's going to die. And I said, well, why? I mean, because everything I had heard to that date, the child weighed like 9 pounds. And she was, gloriously beautiful when she was born. And she says, but she's not thriving. She's not eating. She doesn't hardly cry. She doesn't do anything. So I went to the hospital and sat with the child. And I was very lucky to figure out that the child basically just needed to know it was loved. And once I did my, muscle testing, and worked with the spirit of that child, from then on, that child came right on, and it was out of the hospital in 2 days, and they had no idea what had happened. The doctors did. And this has happened in other cases too. So, I put no limits on what this can do, and I make no claims. I cannot promise anyone they'll get well, but I can tell you, if you're willing to work something like this, of analyzing and looking at yourself on a real, true basis, is often where we find the most results with our health and our happiness.
Yeah, I believe that's totally true. And as you're talking, I've joked on the show a couple times, like I want the Eckhart Tolle package where I have one night of darkness and figure it all out, and then all my problems are healed in 24 hours, and I'm just this brilliant person. And you know what? I think most of us, the majority of us, obviously don't get to do that. And so, but I also believe in the process of healing, you will get what you can handle. I mean, depending on what you're dealing with, it might take you a while before you can learn, okay, this is what this is about. And sometimes it just can't. Your body, your mind, your spirit can't take it. So it's a longer process, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, and sometimes we're just not quite ready.
Absolutely.
I find that people come to me when they are truly ready to heal. I mean, it just really amazes me, to the point of just amuses me, because a lot of people will say, I had to come through this valley. I had to get to this point where I realized I could no longer take that 15th prescription drug. I could no longer assume that I wasn't going to keep choosing the wrong man that's going to abuse me. I mean, just all kinds of things. It's like a journey that we're all taking. We're getting there. And when we're at the point where we're ready to do something about it, and we're serious about it, that's when probably the most help can be given.
Got a couple more questions for you on chat, Cinda. Alice in Wonderland wants to know, did the baby's personality change after the session at the hospital?
Well, she lived. That was the important part. She didn't have any personality before then. I mean, she was just laying there in the bed. And her grandmother had called me. She said, it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. She said, I don't think that the child may live. I just have this horrible feeling. And she said, would you just go? and she was in the NICU, so I wasn't going to intrude on that. But I did go to the hospital and sit in a quiet waiting room by myself. That it was like a late afternoon, and there weren't any visitors there. And I just did muscle testing to find out what was going on with the child. And once she knew that she was welcomed into the squirrel, that people wanted her, that she was loved, it was like, oh, okay, all right, well, I can get into this. It's like she did perk up right away. So if you want to call that a personality change, yes, from going to being totally blah, and doctors and people weren't sure she was going to be able to do anything because she wouldn't nurse, she wouldn't do anything. Okay. And then later she was perfectly healthy. I guess that's a personality change, but to me it's a soul change.
Okay, we have another question from Alexandria. I have arthritis. How can I help myself?
Well, there's a lot of things for arthritis. I always suggest people look at diet, one thing, because it's a big part of fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. People have arthritis-type symptoms. They're not exactly alike, of course, but diet can have a whole lot to do with that. When you start putting that along with looking at something like this, some of the major things that can be worked on with Sacred Sailor Healing is autoimmune symptoms. Our body fighting itself, attacking itself. And when you can get that stopped, a lot of arthritis symptoms will go away or will lessen. I mean, how old am I? I will be 64 in a few months. And 20 years ago, I could hardly move. This afternoon, I was out in the yard working like a farmhand for 5 hours. And I'm here tonight, looking like this, not as sore as I would have been 20 years ago and 20 years younger. I think that arthritis is an illness that is almost and I don't mean a convenience for the person to claim they have arthritis, but convenience for the body. It's like we get wear and tear and things going on, and suddenly we're not eating right, and we're not sleeping right, and we're eating too many sugars. We're doing a lot of different things, and an arthritis type of symptomology starts going on. So can it help arthritis? Yeah, I've seen it help a lot of people with arthritis, and I can't guarantee anyone they get 100%, but most people do get improved. And that's the part you want. You're looking for a better life, one without as many symptoms, and to feel as good as you can.
Nacinda, you said that God leads you. Can you explain how he does and how Sacred Cellular Healing works? We're kind of also in the Bible Belt, so I'm really curious, because there are people out there would absolutely say no. What you're doing is wrong, or God is not working through you. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I find this question often, and I don't know how we can ever claim that God isn't leading someone. I don't think I would ever be that brave to say you haven't heard the voice of God. Or, God, you're not praying to God, you're doing something else. God isn't the one leading you. There are certainly people that are negative, people that influence our lives, people whose energy we certainly just are better off not being around. But God, no. I think when you're dealing with God, I think it's just a very one-on-one experience. I went to the step of getting ordained as a Christian minister, and that to me was important. Did that make my relationship with God any deeper? I believe it did. But I think I've always had a relationship with God that was very honest, even when I was not leading a very good life. There have been times in my life where I certainly was not a real good child by any such stretch of the imagination. But when I ignored him, when I didn't listen to my small inner voices, that's when I would get the sickest. So do I have a relationship? Oh, yeah. And do I do my best when I listen to it and use it to help other people? Absolutely. I think God wants us to be well, and he designed us to be healthy. We're going to be the healthiest when we're, as in my terminology, we're sitting at his feet and listening. And when we can just find that part of us that is reverent and say, I'm willing to connect with that. Energy is, I mean, God made us all energy spirits. I mean, he went to spirit himself and left his physical body to leave earth. We're more, we started out as spirit. We start out as energy. And there's nothing about this that's hocus pocus or that is anti-Christian. As a matter of fact, I think it's the roots of Christianity. We just don't talk about it a whole lot.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I would say that Jesus was, well, one of the first healers, early on. But,
yes.
But yeah, we'll definitely not go there. That's for a whole other show. But I want to remind everyone, if you have a question for Cinda, I'm monitoring the chat, or you can call us if you're in the Triangle area at 919-518-9773 or Skype Computers 2K Voice. So what else besides chronic illnesses can sacred cellular healing help?
I've done a lot with abuse, as I mentioned, and by dealing with the abuse issues, people get rid of their health issues, and they're so amazed at that. They come in for fibromyalgia, and we end up working on when they were abused by their uncle as a teenager, and all of a sudden we work through this, and it's like, well, wait a minute, my fibromyalgia symptoms are gone. Or we work with someone who maybe is having a different kind of trouble. I think trouble can find us most anywhere and in many, many different forms. I just designed this to work with people with illness, but it actually can work from any standpoint. If you know that you have problems in your past that still bother you to any degree, codependency, the ability to not function well in your family of alcoholics, if you're not succeeding in your job and you can't figure out why you're the only one who's not getting ahead. I mean, all of these are introspective type things. And if you can begin to look inside honestly, there's nothing to fear and everything to gain. Most of the time, our fears, we just let them be too big. And it's like, oh no, that could possibly have anything to do with the pain in my foot or the exhaustion I feel. Well, the thing of it is, it can very well have to do with it. And I'll give you as prime example, and that's our immune system. If you're not healthy, your immune system isn't healthy. If your immune system's unhealthy, you catch every virus, every cold, everything coming along. As you mentioned, your weeks and months of being sick. But once you work out these issues, your immune system gets an automatic boost, and it actually begins to be alert for what's going on. And it says, oh, wait a minute, there's so-and-so, I gotta do this or do that. All of these things are subconscious. We don't tell our immune system that we've just come in contact with cytomegalovirus. But if you do, and you have a weak immune system, guess what? You're going to be really sick. So having a strong immune system means you don't have to take, as far as I'm concerned, every vaccine that's out there. You don't have to live in fear that you're going to have everything, that you're going to get everything, that you're going to be so sick, it's going to ruin your life. I believe in strengthening my own immune system, and I do it through sacred cellular healing, and anybody who learns it can do that too.
So, Cinda, I have a question for you. Since you've worked with a lot of people with chronic illness, what do you find that people are doing or not doing to get sick? Because I think, we've talked earlier about getting to the root causes of things, and I think that's something that people, we've talked about this, being aware of things. So what has been your observation?
I think we live in a very, very stress-filled life. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough time. We don't spend enough time with each other. We feel guilty for our relationships or lack of relationships with our children, with the people that we love. Maybe we know we're not honoring ourselves. As we look honestly at ourselves and realize there is something lacking, going in and approaching the problem on an energetic and spiritual basis is such an easy way to do it. And when I say easy, it's easier than surgically going in and removing this stuff from you. I had a lady that had had 9 operations walk through my door one day. And she'd been sick, but it's like she just kept having problems. And her answer was to run to the surgeon and get this done and get that done. And I don't put her down for that. I'm not trying to indicate that at all. But when she began to look at the problems that were there, she no longer is having to have those surgeries. If they are, they're minor. They're maybe to repair what needed to have kind of been fixed in the beginning, and or maybe a structural problem, like with a foot or a leg or knee or something like that. But she doesn't need that surgery for her answer. She doesn't have to justify how she feels, to feel worthy, to feel like the glorious woman that she has turned out to be. And I mean, if you could see her smile now, I remember talking with her and saying, we just have to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, And she's a grown woman. She laughs and goes on with that. But she really had no fun in her life. And as we talked, as we worked, she began, the brain began to come alive, and this wonderful creativity with her. And she said, I've always thought of doing this and so and so. I said, let's try it. Let's do it. She quit her job now, and I'm not advising that for everybody, but she was at a point where she could. Her husband was making enough money. She quit her job and went into doing what made her happy. That woman is fantastic. And that's all I can tell you. She's just like a dynamo.
I want to talk a little bit more about that and attitude, because if people have watched the show, I interviewed someone I consider a mentor to me, Sybil Rhodes, who's just one of the most amazing people that I've met. Now, this woman has been, I think it's 9 years, has had lung cancer. 7 of those has been in stage 4. And I talked to her the other day, and I'm just convinced the woman's never going to die. She's going to be the only person to cheat death, but knowing her and what I've observed is she is someone who has led this incredible life, has this amazing, finds the best in situations, sees the best in people, has served as a mentor to me and others, and is just amazing and has this lust for life. And I believe, the doctors are just like, when I in January said you have a month, in February, another 10 to 12 months. I mean, they just can't tell her anymore. But again and again, she's been told, you shouldn't be around. But it's my personal belief she's lasted so long because of her zest for life, and her attitude frames how she lives. And I believe that directly helps her body. What are your thoughts on that?
I say hallelujah. I mean, she sounds exactly like the type of person that says, I'm not quite ready to go yet. I've got more living to do. And I mean, her attitude is fantastic. I mean, that's the way we'd all like to be, I guess. Let me at it, Lord. Let me go find what I want to do, and if it's helping people, if it's telling my story, if it's helping them with theirs, if it's just being a good friend to them, whatever it is, it's invigorating her, obviously. And her fight doesn't sound like an absolute fight. It sounds almost like it's easy for her to live rather than to die. Does that make sense? Maybe it doesn't. Julie, are you there? Julie, are you there?
Yep. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. All of a sudden, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, we're here listening. Please go on.
Okay, what I was trying to say was that lady has found her way to live. I mean, the fact that she has stage 4 cancer just happens to be what she's got. It doesn't mean she doesn't want to keep on living. She's obviously got something to share and something to be that's not over yet. I'd love to meet her. She sounds fantastic.
Well, she was our most popular show. I interviewed her. You can go back in the archives. Her name's Sybil Rhodes. She's a total hoot. You'll really appreciate her.
Oh, wonderful.
Now we have another question for you, and I want to remind everyone I'm monitoring the chat. You can chat in a question, or you can call us at 919-518-9773 if you're in the Triangle area, or Skype in and save a dime. I know we have people all over the world listening. Computers, 2K Voice. Now Alice in Wonderland wants to know, what angels do you work with and how?
I don't work with too many angels. I can, but I just generally don't. I generally, if I'm going to call on something that's particularly difficult, maybe for me to see or me to know, and I really need the answer for, I will generally call on either one of the saints, or I will call directly to Jesus. I mean, in my experience, if you ask, you'll get an answer. And that's the thing, none of us generally ask. Having someone ask for you and having them be your intercessor, it's just maybe a tad easier, but it works just as well. I don't have anything wrong with asking the angels. I just never have had an occasion where I've had to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you for that. And thanks, Alice, for asking that. Do people continue to be sick if they don't pay attention to all their body, spirit, and mind issues? What have you found?
I think they do. Now, you may get some better. A lot of times people will come out of an illness and they'll be 40%, 50, 60% of what they used to be, but they're never quite well, or maybe as well as they can be. If you go ahead and deal with what caused your immune system to get totally flipped out and not working, then you have a better chance of possibly progressing and feeling better, or maybe never getting sick again with that same type of thing. With fibromyalgia, it's very common to have off again, on again symptoms for some people. Stress is a very, very bad ingredient to add into your life with any illness. And if you get too much stress, then you may have another flare. The fibro fog comes and the pain gets terrible, and you can't think and you can't feel, and you don't even feel like living part of the time.
So talk to me about muscle testing, because my understanding is you use that to try to figure out what is going on with someone and get the best answers with that. Can you talk to us about that and maybe show us what that is and how you do that?
I sure can. Muscle testing is something that it's called kinesiology, and it's used an awful lot by chiropractors. And it's been written up in medical books for many years. I'm certainly not the first one to ever use the principles of kinesiology to find out what's going on with either myself or someone else. But a lot of times when you see a chiropractor, they're testing the strength of your muscle. If it's strong, it's a yes. If it's weak, it's a no, that type of thing. So they're actually trying to get answers from your body about what's going on inside. And they use your arm, or if you're laying on the bed, maybe it's just from the elbow up. That's a little hard for people that are sick. And plus, the average person they just don't always are capable of giving you the absolute correct answer. So I test for them. And when I do muscle testing, I use my fingers and my hands. And I do a little differently than other people. To me, when I put these two fingers together, which are really, they're strong, but they're not that strong. So if something is a yes when I'm asking a question and it goes through those fingers, okay, I know that's a yes. That's a strong yes if it's going through without any problems. But if I get those fingers and there's a definite no, and I hope you can see this. If there's a no, I'm not doing this, or no, that's not the case, that's the same answer, and it's not me, that it's the other person's energy that I'm asking the question for. So I use that completely during the time that I'm working with people, and I can work with them one-on-one or Skype or phone or whatever. It still works the same way.
So even though I'm not in front of you in person and we're having a session, like, you could do something for me right now?
Oh, Yes, if we were at the point where I was ready to do the muscle testing for you, yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
could we do an example maybe so people understand what we would muscle test? Are you able to, or we haven't worked together, so I don't know if that's possible. I'm just trying to, I think it helps people if we give concrete examples, like what are the types of questions that we would muscle test for?
All right, let me see if I can find one that is, in the beginning of what I work with, I work on the emotions first, because generally it's our emotions that kind of get to us with things. So I'm testing whether certain emotions or certain factors are present, whether you have, I might be asking a question. Do you feel this way? Do you feel that way? And then I'm going to test the validity of it myself. Because a lot of times we may think, oh, I have handled that, when the truth is, no, there's still something there and we still need to work on it. So that would be an example.
Okay. Well, Alexandria would like to know about diet and healing, and specifically diet and arthritis. So would that be part of something you'd work with that you think can a diet help heal you?
I think a diet can go a long ways to relieving symptoms. That word heal is an unusual word. A lot of people feel they get extremely better by being on a very restrictive diet from different illnesses. And I hear that every day. No sugar, no white flour, no caffeine, no MSG. I mean, the list can go on and on. But once they restrict themselves that way, it's like the body can process what you do take in that much easier and better. And a lot of the symptoms just kind of subside. So do I think diet works, and do I help people with diet? Yes, but I'm not a nutritionist. We simply talk about the ideas, take what's out there, and do a process and see if some of these things will help. They can find out a lot of that type of information on my websites. And I have interviewed myself, nutritionists and naturopaths and different people who can talk more about diet from a professional perspective.
Excellent. And you touched on this briefly. So how do you start the whole healing process? I believe you said emotions are the first thing that you look with when you're working with someone. Is that correct?
Well, after they are ready to work with me, and it takes usually a small time, because they need to be in preparation. There is a healing prayer that I ask them to go over. There is an intention statement, which is important, so that they're putting their intention of what they want to have happen in their lives, put it out there, say it by intending it. I mean, I'm not a huge proponent of many things, but I do believe in the power of intention, because once we set our mind to something, if we've got a goal, if we can see it and visualize how much healthier we want to be, where we want to be, how we want to change our lives, we have a better chance of getting there. So that by doing an intention statement for the healing that you want done, that's very important. So there's several different phases that I go through first, but yes, one of the first things I deal with in actually sitting down or working over Skype or whatever with people is the emotions. And that's because the emotions will trip us up every time. We think we've got them fixed, and we don't have them fixed. So if we can just do that and kind of get it out of the way, it's clear sailing. Actually, the physical part of healing is not that hard. I know that sounds weird, but it happens every time. If we can get the sacred and get the heart ready for healing, if we can get the intention of healing, if we can get all of the old emotional problems out of the way and undo the damage that the trauma still can inflict upon somebody, if we get rid of all that and just set it aside, the physical questions, they're not that hard. So yeah, that's how we kind of start.
We've got another question from JJ for you.
Okay.
My grandmother Sybil has had a great 4 weeks. This is Sybil's grandson. who I was just talking about. I'm sure prayer and God has a lot to do with that. My question is, how do you learn to have more patience with people who are sick? I'm not very patient.
Well, that is a personal thing. And he's young. He's a grandson, so he's obviously a lot younger than his grandma. Some people, I think, have a hard time coming to grips with who they are as a spiritual person. And if we could just realize, he's interacting with his grandma. His grandma's got something to teach him. She's living because she's teaching in her life. And every day she's on this earth, she's got gifts to give him. So if he could just accept those gifts and let that be a special last gift from his grandmother, I mean, he'll remember that for the rest of his life. It may impact the rest of his life. And as we go through that, we gain more maturity and more patience. You know it comes with living, don't you, Julie?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think JJ just needs to do a lot more cooking for his grandmother. That's going to be my 2 cents on that question.
Cooking, that sounds good.
So, what are typical results of people that you work with? Do people heal?
Yes, they do. Once in a while, I have encountered people that I cannot help, and I can usually tell that very quickly. Mm-hmm. So they don't waste their money. But if there is the possibility of healing, yes, people do get better. And I say 5 or 10% because, I don't know how much they're going to get well, but a lot of these people walk out of here feeling like they've got their lives back, which to me is a total victory. And if you look at their symptoms compared to where they are, the symptoms are gone. So therefore you start down the checklist and say, that's better. And I don't do that anymore. Hey, I'm better about this. And I think a lot of it is mindset, because you have dealt with your old problems. They're no longer bothering you. You do feel better. And guess what? When you got all that going, you do feel like you can tackle life again. It's very, very exciting. I love to be part of it when I get somebody to that point.
No, I think that's a wonderful thing. And again, I've known people who have suffered from both fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. I get that. I mean, you can really bring you down. So what words of wisdom would you have for someone out there who might be listening that's going through chronic fatigue now and, can't get out of bed, or maybe they lost their job? What would you say to them?
Don't lose hope. Please don't lose hope. Whether this is the answer for you, I can't answer that. Only you can answer that. But there are many, many ways in which you can come closer to finding the own answers for you in your life. But they're inside. Those answers are not at the next clinic. They're not with the next boyfriend. They're not with anything. They're inside of us. So if we can be brave enough to look and stop long enough to look outside of the pain, outside of the exhaustion, outside of the symptoms. I mean, they're just trying to intrude upon you. They're trying to get your attention. And obviously they do if they're so bad. But if you can just stop and be brave and ask yourself the tough questions, you're going to find they're really not as scary. I equated this the other day to going on a diet. There is nothing worse than thinking about going on a diet and knowing you have to go on a diet. Oh, I've got to lose weight. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. You and I talked about it. You were the one I talked about this with. But once you get on it, it's actually easier because you've got a prescription. You know exactly kind of how you want to approach things. You start to organize your foods. You get involved. There's a lot of hope involved with things like that. It's really very invigorating. So I encourage people, don't give up hope. And if I could do anything to help them, I stand as an encouragement to anyone who's going through these horrible illnesses. Sometimes it can seem like a death sentence and like there is nothing left. There is no hope left, but there is. And if not, if you are doomed to live out the rest of your life this way, at least try to find a way to live with it where it is not the hopelessness and devoid of any meaning for you. I mean, every person, I don't care whether you have legs or arms or what,
you have the ability to think for yourself and to be there for yourself in your spirit and in your energy. I mean, think of Stephen Hawking.
Yeah.
I mean, that man lives inside of a brilliant body, and he had to find a way to express himself. I think it's just tough when you have a severe illness. But if I could be of help to anyone, they're welcome to contact me.
But I just want to kind of have a question to make sure I'm understanding,
Okay.
based on a couple things you said, because we've had this conversation. So the first thing is going to be emotional and what is going on. And, we talked the other day about how, and I've talked with more than one guest about this, we always think, and I'm speaking from personal experience, oh my gosh, I can't face that. I can't look at it, because we have this fear that I'll die, I'll collapse, I won't be able to survive it. And anyone who I've talked to who's done this healing work thinks that, but when they've gotten on the other side, they're like, oh my gosh, not that it wasn't painful or not that it didn't take work, but why did I spend so much time trying to resist it? Because it was a lot easier to go through and heal it, even if it took work, than spending all that energy trying to not go there.
I agree. I agree very much. And I think that's because you're never going to forget what happened. Okay? If someone did abuse you, let's say, okay? You're not going to be able to forget. But you can get to the point where it no longer affects your life. And whether you can forgive them, that's also a questionable. But it's how it affects your life. That's the part that is yours. That's the part that you're owning and that you're allowing to influence how you feel and everything you do, whether you mistrust that kind of person or whether you don't even go in that kind of situation because it might be dangerous or something of this nature. Our emotions rule us. They do. They rule us much of the time. And if we can learn and separate those old harmful emotions from what we're feeling and what we're using to go forward from today on out, that's a key. Because those are old emotions. They're gone. And if you could just break the connection, that's the important part. And if you ask me what's the one thing that really helps people, it's that they break the connection. They truly break it. And we keep working on it until they do break it. Sometime we think we've got it covered, and then 2 or 3 weeks later it kind of comes up again. Well, wait a minute, let's go back and look at that. And maybe it's just a little different aspect of it. Maybe it's how somebody else got involved in that same emotion, or some other event transpired a week later, a month later, 6 months later, that also affected how you felt about that emotion. We're creatures of emotion. And if we can be brave enough to realize that those emotions are part of us and they're ours and they're not all positive, and we can do something, we can make them, say, go into the history, put them in our history books, the damage from the old emotions. That's why I talk about getting rid of the trauma. I mean, you're not going to forget it, but you're going to break the tie. And that's what's important. It really is.
So, Cinda, tell us about your online course, because I've interviewed a lot of people that do healings or do whatever, but don't have an online course. So what's that about?
Well, it was difficult to put together, I'll tell you that much. It took a lot of time. It took me about a year to truly get it together. And I still put touches on it. I may go back and record some of it even as we speak. But as it is right now, there are, if somebody can use the computer, then they can use it because it's all right in front of them. Some of the folks that were having the toughest time using the computer, I actually started putting it where they get their lessons via email. And that has helped some. I mean, some of us, we're just too sick. We can't sit there and we can't think. But it's one lesson, or approximately one lesson a month. I might send documents and things out twice. But it's basically one teaching and learning and healing session a month. And then they have assignments that will help them get through to that point where we're ready to go the next one. And then by the end of the 12 months, they've gone all the way through everything. Now, is it totally easy? I haven't had anybody say it's actually easy, but I haven't said that people can't do it either.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just determining to get in there and spend some time on yourself. Well, who better to spend some time with, right, than yourself?
Absolutely. Well, you've got to live with yourself your entire life. So had a conversation. I went out last night and was talking with someone, and we were both in agreement that it starts with loving yourself. And I'm like, well, a lot of our problems in society could be solved if we would just love ourselves. So, I mean, I think that's the one thing that people can do. Now, Cinda, there are a couple questions I want to ask you. Ask every guest. You mentioned earlier if someone was really in a lot of pain and suffering from an illness, but what advice would you give to someone, maybe they're not suffering from an illness, but they've gone through a divorce, they've lost a job, and they're in that place where, gosh, this is never going to end, I'm really stuck. What advice would you give to them?
I think you still have to go look at what you're dealing with honestly. Something of this like this, well, Sacred Cellular Healing and what I do has helped people that were not sick when they came in my door, but they were dealing with an illness, dealing with a problem. I had a lady whose sons were addicted to drugs, and she was having a hard time dealing with this in her life. I mean, it was truly affecting her. She was in so much sorrow and so much regret. And I mean, think of all those emotions as a parent that you go through. So, we worked through some of that. Illness comes in all kinds of forms. It can just be your emotions, but, most of the time, if you have enough in the background, you're going to eventually get sick. So that's kind of how it materializes for me and the people who show up at my door. But I've had a little bit of everything. I've had women come in whose husbands were addicted to pornography, and alcohol. I've had all kinds of things. And, I don't put myself out there as being a mental health counselor. But when you're dealing with these and you're looking at them on a soul level and you're looking at your emotions and willing to go in there and address them honestly, on an energetic perspective, this is very possible. You can find out if there's something there that can be softened, if there's something that can be changed by a change of opinion, by a change of the way you address a situation, how you look at yourself, how you act when you're around those people. Sometimes how we work is entirely important to the other person. So, depending on your situation, depending on what's happening, yeah, I think it doesn't have to work just for physical illnesses.
All right, I'm all about getting off the couch. So what one step can people take right now, right after the show, tomorrow morning, tonight, to reawaken their brilliance?
Julie, I am enamored with what you're doing. I think having people here on this show and having people come in and interact, I think that takes courage for those people, even with handles, to ask those questions. They've got to be thinking. They've got to be opening up and saying, well, maybe, maybe there's something that I ought to be doing in that regard. So I would say people need to ask themselves the tough questions. No, are they easy? Absolutely not. None of us want to think about the tough questions, but as we ask them, we become empowered because we're going to get the answers. And once we get the answers, guess what? Then we're more in a better position to do something about whatever we're facing. So I'd say ask the tough questions.
I like that.
And ask them honestly. Some of the work I do with people, I have them go sit in front of a mirror because some of it's self-esteem work. If you don't have a very good self-image, it's very difficult. And, find out, ask yourself, do I love myself? If do I believe anybody else loves me? Am I worthy to be loved? Things of this nature. Boy, that can be tough. But if you're willing to ask yourself that and say, well, yeah, I'm a pretty good person. I don't cheat and lie and steal, and I haven't murdered anyone. maybe a fib every once in a while, but I'm not a bad person. And start maybe write down all of your good things that you are. There's always different ways we can approach this and look on the inside of us to see what's going on.
Nacinda, how can people find out more information about you? Can you give us your website?
Oh, okay. If they want to find out about the Sacred Cellular Healing, just sacredcellularhealing.com. That is part of my Get Well Health website, where you'll find the Learn How to Heal Yourself course. You can book sessions with me individually if you like, either in person or long distance. But if they're particularly wanting things like information on fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, they should go to healthmattersshow.com. That's kind of where this all got started, and that's certainly where my heart is, since that's the root of the illness I came from. But I want this available to all people, and obviously I've seen a lot of different kind of people, so it is available to people with all kinds of interests, problems, things that they want to figure out, things they want to fix.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being on the show, Cinda. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome. I didn't tell you also, you're welcome to contact me at cinda@getwellhealth.com anytime. I'm happy to help.
Fantastic.
Julie, you're a marvelous host, dear.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, everyone. We'll see you here next week. And we have our next Thrive event, which is going to be clearing the clutter from your life, body, mind, and spirit. If you go to reawakenyourbrilliance.com, you can find out more information. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Sundays 9 a.m. to noon. Health In with Debbie Bruck, Mondays 11 a.m. till noon. The Scope of Things with Marilyn Shannon, Mondays 7 to 8 p.m. Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Mondays 8 to 9 p.m. Reawaken Your Brilliance with Julie Seibert, Wednesdays 8 to 9 p.m. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com.